You want a way for teenagers to remain abstinent? Well, tell them to watch It Follows. It Follows is a 2014 horror film written and directed by David Robert Mitchell. Stars Michael Monroe as Jay Height, Keir Gilchrist as Paul, Olivia Lucciardi as Yara, Lily Seppi as Kelly Height, Dale Zavato as Greg Hannigan, and Jake Weary as Hugh. So that's the cast and crew of It Follows. Now, it came out in 2014, and I have barely got a chance to see it. I've heard great things about it. My family, friends said you should watch It Follows, and I finally got a chance to check it out on Netflix, and I have to say, it is a pretty creepy movie. I decided to review it on the final cut because I just wanted to bring more attention to it and just go over my thoughts and review of It Follows. Originally, it was going to have a theatrical and video on demand release, and after the early critical reception, it was all theatrical release instead of the VOD release. And it is a very, very well-crafted horror film. The director also wrote the film, and he said John Carpenter films inspired him to make this, and it was really heavily inspired by Halloween. There are just certain scenes of this that feel very much like Halloween from 1978. But what is It Follows about, actually? Well, it follows this character of Jay, and she finds a new boyfriend. She's been dating this guy named Hugh. They basically have sex, and then he basically subdues her and says, I pass this on to you. I just want you to know it's real, and whatever happens, don't panic. Just know it's real and pass it on. By that, he means there is this thing that follows teenagers. I don't know where it started. You don't know anything about the monster, really. And that's the brilliant thing about this movie, is that it's really an unknown threat. But basically, she has sex with this guy, and it pretty much passed a curse onto some entity following a person and killing them after they just had sex. So she has to pass it on so it would move to someone else. But it does not forget them. It basically kills each person until it goes to the person who started the chain of events. And it is a really creepy film. Like, I don't know, man. It's almost like a metaphor for, like, I guess, sexually transmitted diseases and just basically people losing their virginity. Like, it's always been apparent in horror films. There's always been people who screw around, but this time it's actually integral to the plot. And it's just kind of scary. It's like something that's really unknown. And only Jay can see it. Whoever is burdened with the curse can see the monster. Nobody else can. So the thing is invisible. Plus, it also appears as somebody the person either knows or loves. So it's very creepy in that regard. It's a type of entity that likes to play around with its victims. Overall, the feeling of this film is not as scary, even though it is scary, but it has the feeling of A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984 and Halloween from 1978. This is a very, very kind of like spooky, suspenseful film. And a lot of it is the visuals. I really love the visuals of the movie. It's shot very well. There's a lot of like shots with a lot of headroom in it. Whether it be car shots, there's a lot of POV shots with stuff walking, drive shots that are just on a crane, and just like from a point of view of driving, and a lot of movement. But the set design and everything is a mixture of like the 60s, the 80s, and 90s, and now, so you really don't know what time period it's in. It almost feels very dreamlike, and that was the intention of the filmmakers. As far as the acting goes, I really like the acting. There's another character that it starts off with, and they're just running and just walking throughout their neighborhood. Her dad's trying to talk to her, and she drives off, and she says how much of a pain she was and that she loves her father. And then you don't see what happens. It cuts to her being basically like disembodied on a beach, and it's just crazy. And then it moves to a new set of characters, and Jay has some sisters and a friend she knows. And yeah, she just recently dated this guy, and it starts off there. Somebody's following him. So after Jay has sex with Hugh, he leaves. She reports it to the police, and she pretty much talks to her friends, and none of her friends believe her until things get a little freaky like horror movies usually do. And that's when they talk to Hugh about it, and the best thing to do is pass it on. There really is no sure way to defeat this thing. It's just so refreshing to see a horror film where you don't know much about like the entity or the monster, so to speak. its origins are very ambiguous, and there is no sure way to defeat it. The characters' fates are pretty much sealed, and I haven't seen this level of dread, again, like I said, since A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's just like they just have to keep moving, and the thing follows them no matter what. And living in that fear, and it really has a real sense of dread that is missing from other horror films. Plus, the soundtrack, holy shit. The soundtrack is done by Disasterpeace, and this soundtrack is amazing. I love this soundtrack, probably my favorite, like, it kind of has the feeling of the old John Carpenter films and 80s films, with a little bit of the music that you hear in Stranger Things or from Cliff Martinez in Drive. It just has that type of nice synthesizer techno vibe, and the music to this is incredible. Some of the scary scenes sound very much like A Nightmare on Elm Street, with the part where Nancy's friend is like sleeping and Freddy's attacking her in the bed. It has that type of feeling, especially in the swimming pool sequence. Above all, it's nice seeing this entity that's unstoppable, but also when the friends start to help, they try to figure out different ways to stop it, and they still don't really believe Jay until the very end. In the third act, that's when everybody kind of bands together, and it's like your usual horror movie where they try to defeat this thing once and for all. And even at the end of it, you're just not sure if it is really gone. It's kind of there. It's always there. Which again kind of goes to a metaphor of like sexual experiences, I guess. But it's very scary. But it's nice to see that, because you always have like the cliches of teens screwing around, running around naked, and just everything. But this time it's actually integral to the plot, and it plays upon the cliches and turns it on its head. And I like that. It's very different. So if I had to give It Follows a score, I would give it a 4 out of 5, an A-, and an 8 out of 10. It Follows definitely makes the final cut. It's not like the best horror movie ever made, but it's a very well crafted, very enjoyable, very scary horror film at certain points, very disturbing. I saw it last night, and some parts kind of got me kind of scared. I'm like, this is really freaky and creepy, and I haven't felt this way in a while. Just some really disturbing stuff in there. But I respect it, because it's been a while since a horror film has done that. Plus the way it is shot, the cinematography is excellent. You don't have that shaky cam stuff. You don't have the found footage. It feels like an old-fashioned horror movie you would watch from like the 1980s, but with like modern technology and younger actors now. Something about it just feels like a more simpler time, really, and I just love It Follows. It is a very, very well done horror film, and if you have not seen It Follows, you should definitely check it out on Netflix right now. You will not regret it. As a horror fan, it surprised me, and yeah, it took me forever to see this movie. I've heard great things about it, but I finally saw It Follows, and I really like it. It's one of my favorite horror films of this decade. So yeah, if you have seen It Follows, let me know in the comments below, what did you think of the film? What was your favorite moment? And yeah, if you like this video, click the like button, comment, and subscribe.